welcome to another episode of Debut Diaries. This is a series where I talk all about my experience of being a debut author. My first book this is not the real title. It's currently untitled, but I've been codenaming it #Black Witches book, and it comes out in summer 2021 with Simon Pulse. You can check the description for all the information about it, but that means I am going to be a 2021 debut author, and so I've been using this series to chat about all the different things that come up in the debut author experience. And today I am talking about getting my edit letter. First thing about edit letters in traditional publishing, it can come at really different times. There's no standard time for getting your edit letter. It really depends on your editor and their workload and also your season. So when your book is being released, of course, people who are in earlier seasons will get their edit letters before people in later seasons. I got my edit letter 10 months after signing my contract? No, 10 months after my offer. 6 months after signing my contract. And so I got my edit letter. I am a soft baby. I really like getting my critique because I like making my stories better, but my skin is oh so very thin to begin with. And so I usually have to take a lot of time, like about a week or so, to dive into my edit letter. But this time I have a deadline, so I can't whine like a little baby and spend a week weeping over the changes I have to make and how soft my feelings are that someone didn't magically think everything about my book was perfect and needed no changes. But I have a deadline, so I was given a month deadline. I was asked if that deadline worked for me. It wasn't just like, here it is, and now you do it. My editor did ask me if that would work for me. I revised fairly quickly, and when I read through the edit letter, I could tell that it was something I could do within that timeline. So my deadline is a month. So at the end of March, very close to when you're going to be watching this video. And so I knew that I couldn't flop like a baby in bed and avoid reading the edit letter because I'm soft for criticism for a week, because I would waste a week. I knew it was pretty much like, okay, I think I got the edit letter on the 28th of February, and I was like, you have the 29th of February to wallow and worry and do nothing, and then on the 1st you gotta read it and you gotta get stuff done. So I did give myself time to be in my feelings. I hadn't read the letter when I was in my feelings, by the way. I opened the letter because I was so curious, and there was a paragraph where my editor said all the wonderful things she loved about my book and all the positivity, and it was so nice. And I was like, oh, that's wonderful. I am not going to read any further. I am going to obsess over all this positive stuff that was said here where I don't have to fix anything and everything is wonderful, and I'm just going to bask in that for a day, and then I'll go through the actual letter itself. Now I'm going to break down how I approached my edit letter and when I actually read it and going through all of that. So if you're ever wondering about edit letters, like ones you get from your agent, which I have gotten edit letters from my agent before, or ones that you might get from a publisher, if you're wondering how to go about breaking those down for the first time, that's what I'm going to be sharing now, is just sharing how I did that. So after I had gone through my feels, I made the decision to read through the edit letter. I always read through the whole thing first, just so I can have an idea of what's happening before I even start trying to figure out how I'm going to make those changes. So I needed to respond to my editor still to let them know, yeah, this timeline works for me. And so I needed to read through everything to know if it was all doable for me before I agreed to the timeline. So I read through the whole edit letter, and it was nothing like as much like what I was expecting. Like I was expecting that it was going to be an enormous amount of world building stuff but things that were going to be really difficult for me. Like I was going to have to figure out how to like tear the world apart and build it back together, because I do have difficulties with world building. But it was essentially a lot of questions. So just asking, what about this? And how does this work? And why does this happen? And can you explain this? And can you elaborate more on this? It was very much in the style of the edit letters I get from my agent. She also will ask me a bunch of questions like that. I really like that format because it doesn't say this is what you have to do. It just questions everything that's in the story and it prompts me to think about it. And a lot of times my agent and my editor will pick out things that I didn't even think to explain because it's all in my head. So to me, it all makes sense. So why would I explain that? But she brought all of those up. So that was really good. And I read through it all, and it was really mostly for me expanding on what was already there. I wouldn't need to be chopping a bunch of chapters. Excuse me. I wouldn't need to be adding a bunch of chapters. There wasn't anything that was hugely structural. It was mostly like in the timeline, moving around some chapters. And I could tell all of that when I read through the edit letter. Nothing stuck out to me as this is something that's gonna require more than a month from me. And I was like, okay, I feel good about that. And so I think this timeline is realistic for me. So at that point, I replied to my editor to say, hey, I read through all the notes. I don't have any questions yet, but I may have questions later, because she had asked me if you have any questions or you want to set up a call. And so I was like, okay, I don't have any right now. This is doable in a month. Thank you. Awesome. On my merry way. And so the next step after I had read through everything was going through it again very slowly. So what I did was I opened up a document in Scrivener. My editor also gave me inline notes as well on the document. So those were in Word and the whole document was in Word. To put it back in Scrivener, often when I do edits, what I'll do is I'll put it back in Scrivener, which like from Word means I have to like copy and paste every chapter so that I can get it separated into the folders the way I want. It is extremely tedious, but in this case, because it wasn't really like huge structural things, I didn't see any point in taking it from a Word document and putting it into Scrivener. But I did in my original Scrivener file for the book. I just put the Word file there to keep it there. And then I went into my folders that I keep for revisions, and that's where I made my revision notes, because I can split screen, which is nice. So I had the edit letter on one screen, and then I would make point form notes. So anytime something in the edit letter came up, I would write a point form note, and either it would be the answer to the question that my editor had proposed. Like one of the questions was, there's a thing in the book called The Calling, which is essentially like a coming of age ceremony. So for example, one of the questions would be, do all witches have their calling at this age? And so my point form note would be, no, they don't really. It depends on their puberty. Make note of this. So then that way I knew I needed to explain that, and I would go through and do that for every single question. If I didn't have the answer to the question, I would write explain why this is happening and list what was in the question. And then after I did all that, the point form for all of those, for all the notes in the edit letter, I then went to the Word document and I went through and I did point form notes for everything that was inline there as well. So that I feel like it took a couple days for me to do that. Yeah, because it's lengthy. It takes a lot of time to do all the point form notes. I think maybe it took me a day to do all the point form notes, and then it took me another day to do the next step I'm talking about now. So the next step was that I did a chapter summary. So I made a numbered list of every single chapter. I provided a short description of what happened in the chapter so that I would know exactly what happened in every chapter. And then I took all those point form notes and I slotted them in to where I needed to do them in the chapter. So if it was like explain this term, then I slotted it into the chapter where that term first appeared, and did that. So I essentially like took my edit letter and my inline notes, I made them all into point form notes, and then I put all the point form notes into chapter summaries so I know what it is that I'm fixing in every single chapter. In some cases, there were things like I had to have two characters argue about a topic and they didn't really mention it in the story, so they needed to argue about it multiple times. So I found chapters where they would have an opportunity to argue about that, and I wrote the point form argue about this, and I copied and pasted it into several different chapters. And so once I was done, I had this entire chapter summary listing every single chapter and listing point form all the changes that were happening in the chapter. I also ended up going through and going back to those sections where I wasn't quite sure how to explain that and answering all of those questions and figuring out how I was going to explain those things. I did end up setting up a call with my editor after all, so then I had to email her and be like, I actually do have things I want to talk with you about. Can we set up a call? And so I set up a call with her so that I can explain all of the things I had planned in order to answer her questions so that I could get her feedback on them. Because I was thinking, I was like, I only have a month. What I don't want to do is do all this stuff and then just have her be like, I don't really think that was a great idea. So I thought for me, it would be better if I talk through with them. I talk through the ideas with her and got her feedback on it before I went forward. And so all the feedback was positive. There was only one point where she had brought up another question, which like created another plot hole in what I had tried to think of to fill a plot hole. And so in that case, it was really good that I had talked to her, because then I wouldn't have implemented that change and then just ended up with another plot hole. So that's something I'm pondering on now, March 16th. When you see this video, I assume I'll have figured it out, because I'll be very close to deadline and it would not be good for me to have not figured that out by then. So I think I'm gonna have all that sorted by that time, which will be great. Yeah, that's all about the experience of getting my edit letter and also how I break down edit letters to work with them. This experience went really well for me. All of the things my editor said, I agreed with 100%. There was nothing that she said where I was like, oh, I don't want to do that, or you haven't understood what I wanted to say, which is wonderful. It's always great to know that the editor you'll be working with really understands your story and understands the vision for your story. And it's really nice to be able to just get that immediate feedback and go and implement it. I've had a really positive experience so far. Honestly, revising and me are like not pals, but this has been the most positive revision experience I've had by far. I think possibly because I'm not having that added pressure of trying to get published with the story and the revisions I'm making, because this is already being published. I just need to get the work done and be proud of my work, and I have been, so that's been really great. And I think this experience has also been really good because the edit letter that I got from my editor is very similar to how I get edit letters from my agent. So I get that document with all of the questions in it that I can answer, and then I also get inline comments with additional questions, and I put those together in that point form, and I make my summary and I put everything together. So that really helped me as well, because it wasn't like it was a brand new process that I had never been involved in before. It was pretty much the same process I've gone through with my agent before, and so there was a certain extra level of comfort. And that's it for this Debut Diaries episode. If you want to see more of the Debut Diaries series, you can check it out over here. I think I'm pointing the right way. And you can check out that entire playlist. I post videos every Tuesday, once a week. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe if you haven't already. I post videos like this. I post writing themed videos. Occasionally I post this Sims 4 / book related video, but mostly about writing tips and publishing advice and my experience as a traditionally published author. And thank you so much for watching. Bye!